Welcome to video 2, in which we will discuss the daily lessons in our curriculum. So the TEKS-based support in daily lessons is going to be focused on the TEKS. We are doing that in order to provide a very tight curriculum. And here's what I mean by that. We have really studied the TEKS to try to make sure we know exactly what is expected of students in each of our courses. And we're going to really try to stay on the path. It is so easy to stray from the path. Sometimes it's as simple as the numbers that you choose. For example, if a student is asked to perform operations with rational numbers, does he need to be able to add 5/7 plus 4/9? Or is it sufficient that he can add 3/4 plus 5/6, for example? So we have really studied to make sure that we know exactly what is and what is not expected of students in each of our courses. Most teachers would agree we never have enough time to teach everything we need to teach as well as we want to teach it. But if we can really focus in and make the most of our time by teaching the TEKS that we are responsible for, then hopefully that will help our students to perform even better on those expectations. We have a lot of resources to use to accomplish this. Of course, we have textbooks for each course, but we also have 3 other resources that are available for on-level students in all of our courses, and we have a 4th resource available to our Tier 2 students in 7th and 8th grades. So lots of resources that we can use, and we have tried to make those more readily accessible to teachers. So let's go ahead and go into the curriculum and take a look. All right, here we are back on the 7th grade math page. Let's take a closer look at the scope and sequence to see what is new. The first thing you probably notice is the color. Apparently the district assigns a different color to each content area, and math is blue. And if you know me, you know that makes me happy because I really like blue. But really we've changed the color, well, partially for that reason, but also as a visual cue for you, so that when you open a document, if you see purple, you know you're looking at the old curriculum. But if you see blue, you know it's the new curriculum. Other things that are really the same are the curriculum preview dates are here. The district testing dates are here. We have each of the units, the approximate number of days for the unit, the topic, and the TEKS. A couple of differences are we have put in the 6 weeks dates. We thought that would be useful. For example, here, when the CFA is on November 18th and 19th, and the third 6 week starts on November 16th, now we know that the CBA will be on days 3 and 4 of the third 6 weeks, and that just might be kind of helpful. Another change is with the way we have numbered the units. This used to be Unit 1-1, 1-2, and 1-3. And that made sense. It was helpful, but it got kind of confusing when you had something like Unit 6 down here. And here it would be called Unit 2-3, second 6 weeks, third unit. But here the same exact unit is now called 3-1, third 6 weeks, Unit 1. And that was just kind of confusing. We thought, let's just number them 1 through, I think, 14 in most cases. Some courses have a couple more units, but hopefully that'll be simpler. Another thing that I think I'll point out right here is that some of you will find you have more units than you used to have. And that is because we took some of the really long units and split them apart. A good example here in 7th grade is equations and inequalities. That used to be all one unit, and it was kind of a long unit. So what we're doing now is students will learn about equations and have a summative assessment. Then they will learn about inequalities and have a separate summative assessment. We thought that would be better for students and also better for teachers. So hopefully you will like those changes. So scope and sequence, pretty much the same, just a few differences. Let's look at a curriculum unit, but let's go into a different course. We'll take 8th grade math. First 6 weeks, representations and values of real numbers. Looks like we have a typo there. We'll correct that. Those things are going to come up throughout, so just let us know if you see something and we'll get it fixed. All right, so the unit, again, probably looks very familiar here in the beginning. We start out with vocabulary. Then we have the ELPs. You may remember that in the older curriculum, there were a lot of Word documents or PDF documents embedded throughout the curriculum. Now, since we're in Google, we're able to just link those items, so that's really nice. Anytime you see something underlined, you know that's a link. And you can click on it to see a thumbnail, and then if you'd like, go ahead and click to fully open it. So on the first page of every unit, we have those ELPS proficiency standards. We also have the mathematical process standards, which of course are a part of everything that we do in math, so we don't want to forget about those. The vertical alignment page is also very similar to what it has always been. Remember, we are in this center lane. This is what we are tasked with teaching this year. It is helpful to know sometimes what our students have done before. For example, on this first TEKS, students are representing the sets and subsets of the real number system. Well, in 7th grade, they were representing sets and subsets of the rational numbers. So we realize here the only difference this year is the irrational numbers. That's good to know. Just because you see nothing over in the left column, that doesn't mean they've never learned it before. For example, 8.2D is ordering numbers. Well, obviously they've ordered numbers in the past. It wasn't a focus of a TEKS in 7th grade, but you know they've done it, and they've done it in 6th grade and 5th grade. So just because you don't see anything here, don't assume they've never done it before. Also on the right side, in the very first unit of 8th grade, there's not a lot that translates directly to a 9th grade algebra TEKS, but in most of the 8th grade units, you'll be able to see a clear path going from the 8th grade to the 9th grade TEKS. And so it's good to know what your students need to be prepared to do when they leave your classroom. You know, what is it that they're moving toward? Of course, remember the bold TEKS are the readiness TEKS, and the TEKS that are not bold are the supporting TEKS. All right, now we have the content standards descriptors. On the left column, though, we have the TEKS written out word for word, so that's useful information. This is underlined, and so we know that's a link. And this is where we have attached the 2015 and 2016 released STAR questions for 7th and 8th grades, and the 2016 released EOC questions for Algebra 1. Please remember that while you may use these with your students all year long, the 2017, 18, and 19 questions are reserved until after the DBA. Now, they are always available for teacher use. You are welcome to use those to influence your teaching throughout the year, but please do not use those questions with students until after the DBA. When you scroll past those, you'll find some questions without a year. Those were written by teachers, and some of these questions are fantastic, and you will want to use them with your students. Others might not be as well aligned. These were written back when the TEKS were brand new, and we were hearing the word rigor a lot. Well, some of these questions are going to be a little bit too rigorous, or maybe they sort of drifted away from the TEKS a little bit. So when you're looking at these teacher-created questions, just look at them carefully to determine whether it really is something that would be of use to you and your students. Now, returning to the curriculum, in the right side, in the right column, we see the content standards descriptors. And these are just more specific parts of the TEKS. You know, a lot of the TEKS are very general. So these descriptors here on the right side are more of a listing of exactly what a student should be able to do when they have fully mastered this TEKS over here. These, again, were written back when the TEKS were brand new. So again, we've learned a lot since then. So while you should still certainly use these, there's a lot of good information here. You will want to be careful. If you come across one and you think, you know, I just don't really feel like that is within the scope of the TEKS for my course, then trust your judgment. You're probably right. Revising and updating these content standards descriptors is something that Kristen and I will be working on throughout the year this year. I hope that by this time next year these are all fully revised and we can use them. But for right now, use them, but use them carefully. All right, as we scroll down, we have all of the same stuff for all of the TEKS in the unit. Again, bold is readiness. Now, this is the first page that looks really different. Again, all of the embedded stuff is now linked, like the vocabulary right here. This is our visual vocabulary you'll recognize with the word, the definition, and the example. So that's all still right here for us. We also have these ELL resources from the McGraw-Hill text. These can be really useful. There's a lot of good ideas here for things that you might do to help those ELL learners. So be sure to take a look at those. Also from McGraw-Hill, we have this additional support for on-level learners. And these are you'll see that some different activities for different learning styles, such as auditory learners or kinesthetic learners. So there's some great ideas here, and you might not use an activity exactly as it is written here, but it may spark an idea that you will use them to create a really great activity for some of those students. And then the last piece here is the RTI support. That was a separate page within the curriculum in the past. Now we have it linked. And this is organized by TEKS. So each row is a different TEKS in the unit. Column 1 is Tier 1. These are the students in your regular on-level class who just need a little bit of extra help. You take care of a lot of that through your seating arrangement, through your questioning strategies and so forth. But there are also some resources that you could use with those students. So for example here, TEKS 8.2a, if you look in McGraw-Hill Chapter 1, Lesson 7, then the reteach page or the extra practice page and so forth, those might be useful to those struggling students. Tier 2, these are the students that have a second math class throughout the day. You might call it a STAR class, an extreme class, an EOC class, whatever it is on your campus and for your course. So these students need a little bit of extra support. Last year and again this year we have purchased ThinkUp Math for those classes. Unfortunately, they have not published ThinkUp Math for Algebra 1. If they had, we would have bought it, but they haven't. But we do have it for 7th and 8th grades. So again, looking at the TEKS for TEKS 8.2a, that's Unit 1 in ThinkUp Math. Now there's lots of stuff in Unit 1, but some teachers have gone through and helped us pick out some of the very best activities. So you can look at these pages in ThinkUp Math and know that you're going to find some good choices for your Tier 2 students. So hopefully that'll save you some time. You won't have to dig through everything, but you can go right here and pick something really good very easily. Now, like I said, algebra is just a little bit different, so let's take a quick look at an algebra unit. I am going to go into Algebra 1, and I'm going to look at the second unit in Algebra 1. The first unit is really just so much review. Let's look at Unit 2. And again, it looks very familiar, beginning with the vocabulary. Everything on those first couple of pages is exactly the same as it is for 7th and 8th grades. When we get here to this last page, though, we'll see that sort of pink colored box is missing. McGraw-Hill did not provide that additional support for on-level learners in Algebra 1. So that box is missing. But you still have your vocabulary, you still have your ELL resources. And the RTI support page is still here. The column on the left for your Tier 1 students, just like it was in 7th and 8th grades. But again, since Mentoring Minds has not published ThinkUp Math for Algebra 1, what we have here instead are a few more resources from your McGraw-Hill text that you might use in those EOC classes. So for TEKS A.2c, look in Chapter 1, Lessons 1, 2, and 3. You've got a study guide and intervention that you might find useful, and then some math triumphs that you might find useful. So this does look a little bit different from 7th and 8th grades, but it is laid out in the same format. All right, let's move on then from the support pieces to the actual meat of the unit. Here is our calendar. It is linked, and the calendar is very much like the calendar you saw last year. Every unit is a different color. We will look at Unit 2 in Algebra. That's the yellow one here. And the big difference here is, like I mentioned in Video 1, the daily lessons are now labeled by the part of the TEKS we're going to cover, rather than being linked to a lesson in a textbook. So we can see that TEKS 8.5a, we're teaching that on the first day of the unit, the second day, the fourth, the fifth, and the 7th day of the unit are all A.5a. Well, the first day, we're solving one-step and multi-step equations. That's really review. I mean, that's not really an Algebra 1 TEKS. But moving on then, on day 2, we bring in the distributive property. That is algebra. Then the next day, we write linear equations. That's a different TEKS, but that's where we felt like it would fit well. Then we go back to A.5a. Now we have variables on both sides. Continue with A.5a. All types of equations, because looking at an equation and figuring out the strategy necessary to solve it is a whole other skill that students need to understand. Then finally, here on day 7, proportions, because that's a very different type of equation to solve. Those are all the parts of A.5a that we felt like we needed to make sure that our Algebra 1 students understood. So that's what you're going to find when you look at the calendar, is the TEKS broken up into daily lessons. Now this is not set in stone. This is really more of a clay mold that you will shape to fit your students' needs and to fit your style and your preferences. Maybe you think that writing linear equations should come after solving equations with variable on both sides. That's fine. Maybe you think you don't need to spend a whole day with Refresher and you can get started on distributive property day one. That's great. Whatever you feel like is best for your students, that is certainly what you should do. This is just kind of a starting point. Here's one place that an adjustment would be easy. You'll notice on September 10th we have a CFA and nothing else. But on September 15th, there's a CFA and a lesson. As we'll discuss more in video 3, CFAs are intended to last 15 or 20 minutes at the very most. That means you should still have half of a class period left for something else. So on September 10th, maybe you think students need some more practice with solving equations of all types. You have half a class period to do that. Maybe you think literal equations will take more than a day and a half, so you want to push things back so you have more time to spend on literal equations. That's all your choice. Here's another place we have a whole day reserved for the review. Well, maybe you're a teacher who likes to do a little bit of review every day throughout the last half of the unit, and then continue doing some instruction on the day before the test. That's fine. That is certainly your choice. So again, this is just a starting point that we hope you will find useful. Of course, the rest of the calendar is again very similar to last year. We have the curriculum preview labeled here. When there's a district exam, that will be labeled on here and so forth. So that is the calendar. And then we have the TEKS. You may remember last year at each curriculum preview, we passed out a sheet with all of the TEKS for the 6 weeks, and it was split up by unit. This year, since they're attached to the unit, it is only one unit at a time. But I really like the way we have this formatted, because these are all 8.2 TEKS on this particular unit. This is our readiness TEKS, and then these are the supporting TEKS that are required in order to have fully mastered the readiness TEKS. And I just like being able to look at it in this format, and you can see this whole 8.2 family with the supporting TEKS right here actually lifting up that readiness TEKS. It's just a good way to sort of analyze what's happening, and that helps you know how you might want to plan your lessons. So finally now we get to move on to the actual days of the unit. In the previous curriculum we had bullet points, a bullet point for each day in the unit. And so this is probably the most visually different part of the curriculum, what we have done here. So we have day 1, which is TEKS 8.5a, solve one-step and multi-step equations. Day 2, 8.5a, multi-step equations with the distributive property. Day 3, A to C, write linear equations from verbal descriptions, and so forth. So this is exactly what we saw on the calendar. This matches up perfectly. Also on each day we have written out the TEKS, so you don't have to go anywhere else to look it up. You know exactly what you're teaching. Here, once we have revised and updated the content standards descriptors, we will list the numbers here. So you could say on this particular day we are maybe trying to cover 1 through 3 on that list on the previous page. And maybe day 2 is 2 through 7 of the descriptors on the previous page. So you can look back to see exactly which skills you're covering on each day. The other thing we provide each day is the HEB ISD resources. So this is what you're teaching, solving one-step and multi-step equations. Well, you have different resources available to do that. We have one resource actually on this day because remember, like I said, this really isn't within the scope of Algebra 1. This is just kind of a slow walk into the solving equations. So we don't have a lot of resources. There are a few problems you can use in your textbook to refresh their memory on that. But when we move into the distributive property, we have a lot of resources available. There's an activity in Engage in Math that you might use, or you might use some of these questions from the GPS Readiness Focus Kit. There are several pages worth of activities in the Airbook that you could choose from, or there are also some pages in the textbook you might use. So we've tried to make it really easy for you to know where to go to find the activities that would best teach the concept for the day. You don't have to go looking everywhere. Just look at this page, grab the book, open it up, and decide, yes, that's what I want to do, or no, I'm going to do something different. Hopefully that will be useful to you guys. Then as we scroll on, you'll find here's the CFA. We've got our review day and our test day. So that is really what is different about the daily curriculum. Like I said, mostly it's all the same stuff that you've always had. We have organized it by TEKS, by the concepts within the TEKS rather than by the textbook. And we've tried to make it easier for you to access all of the resources we have available. All right, well, come back and see me for video 3, and we will look at some of those assessments.